Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Good Witch Bad Bitch podcast. I'm Luna, your host, and I'm so excited today, you guys, because we have a guest. Oh, I love having guests on this podcast. And as we're kind of bringing the podcast back up, we're going to have more and more guests on. So today's episode is so fun. I already know this because I'm recording this intro after the interview with Maevius Lynn. So I can tell you it's so fun. It's just such a chill chat. And I think you guys are going to love this episode so much because we're talking about a lot of things that I have no idea about. We are going to talk a lot about Thelema. And if you've never heard about that, that's okay because I really didn't know anything really. And so that's why I love bringing on guests because I only know so much. I can only tell you my experience. And Lynn is truly so knowledgeable and such a sweet soul. And so I think you're really going to enjoy this episode. So thank you so much for tuning in. Maevius Lynn will be joining us here in just a few moments, and she is a ceremonial magician and occultist whose particular focus of her occult path is Thelema. She is an artist, writer, and YouTuber who has a special interest in making the occult accessible and inclusive. She currently resides in the southern US, where she is active in her local pagan community. As a part of that community, she writes and performs rituals, as well as gives educational talks. Some of her educational content can be found on her YouTube channel, as well as published magazine articles. Her dedication to educating others and sharing her love of the occult extends to online spaces where she collaborates with other authors and creators on podcasts, videos, and other various projects. So, without further ado, let's get to the interview. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Good Witch Bad Bitch podcast. It's your girl Luna. I am so excited for today's episode because we are doing another girls' night sleepover type vibe. I have an amazing guest on today, Maevius Lynn. I'm so excited for you all to meet her. So get ready to meet your new favorite dream blunt rotation because it's about to be really fun tonight. So we are, well, I have some eye masks. So if you guys, while you're listening, while you're watching, want to do your skincare, your spa night with us, I think we're also both drinking tea. Is that right?
Yeah, I've got some green mango tea.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
I have my Arnold Palmer tea lemonade.
Oh, nice.
It's my favorite. It's my favorite drink. Um, Beautiful. So, yes, Maevius, do you go by Maevius or Lynn? Which do you prefer?
Yeah, feel free to call me Lynn.
Okay, awesome. Well, I am like so fascinated by your work and
Oh,
I
thank
love like
you.
watching you on YouTube and seeing all the things you do. I would love for you to introduce yourself to all the listeners, for anybody who doesn't know you, and if you're comfortable with it, I would also love to hear your big three.
Oh, sure, absolutely. Yeah, and I admire your work so much. It's so
Oh.
fun, and I love following you not only on social media but also YouTube. So it's so cool we can make this happen. So, hi everyone. I'm Maevius Lynn. You can call me Lynn. I'm a ceremonial magician and practicing occultist. Some of my interests in Western esotericism are rather academic, but I do approach it from a practitioner standpoint. So I get kind of in the nitty-gritty with some of the citations and some of the reading and stuff I get into, but at the end of the day, I'm a practitioner, so I bring that perspective and that energy into what I share. I do have a YouTube channel as part of my educational efforts. I do a lot of stuff in my in-person community, so ritual classes, workshops. I travel around and do that. And if you're interested in attending any of those and learning more about ceremonial magic kind of topics in particular, you can follow me on social media and I announce where I'm going to be when. But I do travel mostly in the United States, but sometime, actually this year, I did give a conference talk virtually in Macedonia. So that
Whoa.
was really cool in Europe. So you never know where I'm going to be. But yeah, the specific area of my occult path is Thelema, and that's a lot of what I focus on and talk about.
That's so beautiful. Oh my gosh, thank you for sharing that. Oh, what's your big three?
Oh, shoot, I almost forgot. Yeah. So, sun and moon are both Taurus, and my rising sign is Leo.
Yes, I love it so, so much. I love it. Wait, okay, so I have a question now that I didn't write down, but just hearing you talk, I thought about
Sure.
it. I'd love to hear about your experience with in-person events because I think that's
Oh, yeah.
something that is so important. And I know with my community, a lot of folks, we're in the Bible Belt, a lot of us
Yes.
are in places where maybe it feels like there's not a ton of witchy or occult,
Mhm.
esoteric or pagan community. But I personally have found that because I've lived both in Los Angeles and here in like Kansas, Missouri area.
Mhm.
And here in the Midwest, in the Bible Belt, like the witchy community is almost more strong because like you have
Wow.
to be like there for each other because it is so, I don't know, kind of like taboo. So, what's been your experience with in-person events? Are you in a place where it's like pretty open, pretty chill?
So I am in North Carolina, and for international viewers and listeners, that is in the southern United States. So it's different than perhaps larger metropolitan areas, like New York or LA or something. So I am definitely in the Bible Belt as well, and there just isn't much here. You think there would be because it's a relatively large sized city, but we don't have any occult bookshops. We don't really have a lot of spaces for that. It's been an extreme challenge for me to rent spaces just to do things like teach tarot classes and stuff. So I will show up with money in hand wanting to rent a space to teach tarot or oracles or I Ching or geomancy or whatever I'm trying to do. And they'll say yes to other people, but no to me as an occultist. So, that's the nature of the South, right?
Yeah.
So, it's wild. I have to sometimes travel to other places to give talks and presentations. However, I'm very blessed. Recently this year, I discovered two different venues that are willing to host me teaching and sort of hosting an occult witchy community. And one is actually a heavy metal coffee shop. So they do heavy metal concerts in the evening as well as like goth nights. And then during the day, they're a coffee shop and they're amazing. It's called Chapel of Bones. Shout out to them. But yeah, it's a challenge. And it's kind of frustrating that I have to travel to make it happen, but you do what you can.
Yeah. That heavy metal coffee shop sounds so cool.
Yes, yes. So if any of y'all are ever in North Carolina and Raleigh, North Carolina, come check out Chapel of Bones. It's awesome.
That's so cool. Yeah, and I feel like that area of the States is maybe a bit more, I don't know, a bit more maybe traditional conservative
Mm-hmm.
than where I'm at. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's definitely hard with those in-person events. And yeah, that sucks that you have to travel, but that's also
Hmm.
probably kind of fun to get to explore.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
do I do enjoy it. Very
Yes,
lucky.
absolutely. Oh my gosh. So Lynn and I are from like such different spheres of the pagan community, yet we have still found each other. And that's one of my
Yeah.
favorite things about yeah, like the occult community. It's not Abrahamic, it's not, there's no rules. Like you can
Mm.
kind of like all have your different vibes. And I know a big thing that I've been seeing a lot recently is folks talking, like I think Benta, the Norse witch, they were talking about how I think it was them who was talking about how they don't follow the wheel of the year.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And that's something that, so for me, I was actually raised Catholic, and
Hmm.
then I sort of discovered Eastern philosophy and was kind of dabbling in Buddhism, and then found my way into paganism. And of course, like a lot of us, like I went straight to Wicca. And so, really, a lot of my beginning witchcraft journey was like the Wheel of the Year. Like that was a
Yeah.
huge thing for me. And as I've stepped away from Wicca and kind of now just identify as like broadly pagan, um, it's more it's more like, I don't know, hit or miss. Like sometimes I'll celebrate like Letha or the solstice or something, but it's
Hmm.
not as, strict. And so I'm
Yeah.
curious, like, what is your interpretation of the Wheel of the Year? What are your thoughts?
Yeah. I am so excited for this conversation because I feel like within the pagan sphere or the witchcraft sphere, even the occult sphere, it's like the wheel of the year dominates. And that's cool if people find value in that, awesome. And I just want to preface what I'm about to say is this applies to me in my practice, and do whatever you want to do. That's none of my business. Okay, moving on. So, um, but I think it's important to remember what the Wheel of the Year is. And so the Wheel of the Year was invented or created by Gerald Gardner, the founder of Wicca. And so it's very tied into that system of understanding magic and the changing throughout the year. And that can be very helpful for people. So for me personally, I think Wicca is cool, but Wicca is not something I do or resonate with. I have no problem, doing some Wiccan rituals or attending things, but at the end of the day, I'm not a Wiccan. I am a Thelemite, so I'm a pretty, I don't know, pretty invested Thelemite. So I would say my spiritual path is Thelema. And as a result, I am part of that culture and that community, and we don't celebrate the Wiccan Wheel of the Year. And people might say, well, why not? Well, our central sacred holy book, the Book of the Law, or Liber Alvel Legis, predates Gerald Gardner. So all of our sort of stuff came before this guy, and he actually borrowed very heavily from Thelema, our holy books, some of our rituals, in particular the Gnostic Mass. So for anyone who is actually a Wiccan or interested in that, I do recommend you attend one of the OTO's Gnostic Masses because you're like, wow, this is really the same. um, oh, what a cutie. We
She's
have a
coming.
guest.
This is my Taurus girl. Anybody who's seeing the visual, this is Lucy. You know Lucy if you've been here. Lucy has joined us.
But back to Gerald Gardner. So his stuff has some of it, but it's its own system. It's its own separate thing. So our holidays in Thelema, or otherwise known as our holy days, come from the Book of the Law. There's a passage actually talking about them. And so they kind of overlap with the Wheel of the Year, but they also don't. We have things unique to Thelema and Thelemic practices. So things that are similar to the Wheel of the Year would be the equinoxes and the solstices. We do celebrate those. They maybe have a little bit different meaning for us, but those are there. But things that are unique to us are holidays like the 3 days of the writing of the Book of the Law, the first night of the prophet and his bride, celebration of the supreme ritual or equinox of the gods. These are things that are unique to us in our religion. But yeah, and one thing I will note too with Thelemites is they're very eclectic. So you will note a lot of Thelemites who do celebrate Christian holidays or Wiccan holidays. But for me, who I have enough going on, I don't need another set of beliefs, holidays on top of my own. I sort of just stick to the Book of the Law for mine.
Yes. Oh my gosh. And yeah, I mean, you're so right about how I do think so in modern paganism and witchcraft, I do feel like Wicca just dominates, like you said, and
Sure.
that Wheel of the Year, it's
Hmm.
it's almost like it's almost like expected of you to follow that.
Hmm.
Um and
But you don't have to. You can
exactly.
follow the Thelemic holidays.
Yes. Well, I feel like this is a great pivot. I would love for you to tell us everything. Obviously, you can't tell us everything probably, but
Yeah.
I am really unfamiliar with Thelema and um I'm loving I didn't know about the Book of the Law. I didn't know about any
Oh,
of these
yeah.
things because again, we're just in these very different
Yeah,
spheres
yeah.
and my Venus in Aquarius, I'm I am so curious. My love language is curiosity and
Yeah.
yes, share it.
So
That's
here's one of my copies of the Book of the Law. I really like this one
it's pretty.
because we on our holidays of the 3 days of the writing of the Book of the Law, at noon we will read a chapter. So there's 3 days for this holiday, and at noon it's traditional to read that corresponding chapter when it was dictated. So I like this one. So, have a little talk about the book of the law. And
Yeah.
as you can see, it's just, nice and big text. You can read it. But yeah, I'm so excited to be here and share what I'm interested in. And I think at the end of the day, conversations like this are particularly important to foster understanding and tolerance in our community. I don't expect people to necessarily start believing in the book of the law or doing what I do, but understanding what people are doing a little bit and having tolerance for different beliefs and practices, I think is really cool. So yeah, I guess where should I begin? Would you like to know
Yeah.
about the philosophies, the book of the law? Where would you like to go?
So I would love to start with like, how would you, not necessarily briefly, because I don't think either of us are brief, but how would you like explain the religion to somebody who's like
Yeah.
never heard of it?
Yeah, so Thelema is a philosophy, it's a religion, it's a system of mysticism. One of its core tenets is do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law, which is very and too often misinterpreted as do whatever you want. That is not what that means. It means to act in accordance of your will, which is your innermost spark of divinity, your divine purpose in life. We are all born with true wills. The process of spiritual advancements within Thelema is a process of understanding yourself. And once you know yourself, being able to, and know your will, being able to do it. Another core tenet is love is the law, love under will. Both of these, by the way, come from the Book of the Law. But the love it's referring to is not necessarily romantic love, although it can be that. It refers to unification, which is a core part of our spiritual progression, spiritual journey. Other fun things out of the Book of the Law off the top of my head. Every man and every woman is a star, meaning there is no inherent inequality to anyone of any gender. The language, it may be a bit outdated for someone, but I think it's important to remember that these things happened in the Victorian era where they didn't have more
Right.
progressive language that we have now. But it refers to every person is a star, meaning their own solar system, their own universe. And, uh, you know, I think it's a really beautiful, self-affirming spiritual path. It's very sex positive. It's very, from its very inception, LGBT inclusive, forward thinking, all of these great things. So, as a queer person myself, it was really important to engage with something that celebrated who I was, which I found Thelema was. It was an unfearful embrace of the self, of knowledge, of reality, and with that, celebrating it. So we in general recognize the divinity within all of us. And an example of one of our core rituals within OTO, which is a fraternity I'm a part of, and as well as my church, the EGC. But there's this ritual called the Gnostic Mass, and a key part of it for the congregation is when they're communicating up there near the divine altar, you cross your arms and you say, "There is no part of me that is not of the gods." And so I think that sums up a lot of the vibes of what we do and what we believe, that we are divine, not in spite of our humanity, but because of it.
Mm. That's beautiful. Oh my gosh. I love the star line. That was so pretty.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, okay, so it's like crazy hearing you say all of that because after being in the occult community for many years, I've noticed there is like some polarization question mark
Mm, hmm.
about Thelema, and
Sure.
I've only seen it, I've honestly only seen it online and like in very vague comments.
Yeah.
And I know that that's something that you have shared with me that you've experienced like
Mm-hmm.
low-key haters because of it. And I know like as someone who does a lot of glamour magic, a lot of sex magic, like I have also experienced people being just misinformed and
Yeah.
making crazy claims. And yeah, I could go into that forever, but it was actually funny because I was doing some research for this interview, and I was telling my husband, like, I need to like, I'm gonna do this interview. We're gonna kind of learn about Thelema and Aleister Crowley, and somehow he's like polarizing, I guess, or he did something. And so he was like, my husband was like, well, what do you do? And I was like, I don't know. And so I was like, let's look it up. And I literally couldn't really find anything.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious, like, I guess it's a two-part thing. A, like your experience with people perhaps miscategorizing or
Hmm.
misunderstanding your religion, what you do, which I think is something like all occultists can relate
Yeah.
to in one way or
Yeah.
another. Um, and also like why you think it's polarizing. Like, why do you think some folks, do they just not understand? Are they misinformed? Yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for the space to talk about this. I'm glad we can have this conversation. Um, well, I think one of the main, well, there's a bunch of things going on, right? But one of the main things I've really seen is back when, so the prophet of the Aeon of Horus, as we believe, is Aleister Crowley. And so the language when I say prophet, all of the language of Thelema is sort of turned on its head, and people understand what we do in our religion from typically a Christian context, and they just have no idea what's going on.
Right.
And I don't blame them because we're so niche, we're so small. When when World War II was happening in Nazi Germany, Thelemites were thrown in concentration camps too. Like, there's not
Oh,
many of us around. Kind of
yeah.
niche. I get it. You don't know what's going on, but you know, when I say prophet, I don't mean a Jesus-like perfect figure that we worship. I don't mean that at all. I mean simply someone who delivered a divine message. And
Right.
so I believe that I don't, as a Thelemite, you don't have to subscribe to a deistic, a polytheistic, an atheistic, or an agnostic viewpoint. You can understand all of these holy texts and philosophies from any direction you want. So I want to leave that open to people in general. But these divine texts that were received through Aleister Crowley, I think are absolutely beautiful and have so much power behind them, and so much transformative value, and a conversation around human nature as well. But in particular, going back to these holy texts, Aleister Crowley was the mouthpiece, but he was not the author of necessarily. So it's like he was channeling it from a divine source, and that divine source could be like a literal external spiritual force. It could be something internal to him. So whatever. But at the end of the day, no, we do not worship Aleister Crowley. We don't view him as Jesus. For me, he is just a guy. I think he was a very interesting guy. I think that he was light years ahead of his time. And that's one of the reasons why he was so heavily maligned, which we will get into very frankly in this later. But at the end of the day, he did have flaws. What a lot of the source of his flaws was the fact he was a British aristocrat. So his view of raising his children was very, he would just get up and leave. He left the raising of his children to someone else, which is very common for that society. His views of sex and relationships were very controversial for the day and age. So one of the things that got him maligned, both in the occult community at the time, as well as the greater British society, was the fact he was openly bisexual. Now, keep in mind, this was a time during the Victorian era where they locked up people for being gay.
Wow.
And Crowley he was out there. He's like, yeah, I'm some of my lovers and magical sex partners were men. And he was very explicit about that. So, like I said, even within the occult community, like the Golden Dawn, he was discriminated against and maligned for that. And they viewed his magical practices, because they weren't heteronormative, as dark and evil and disgusting, which they are not.
Right.
Also, his take on sex magic during the Victorian era was radical. It was whoa, boom. So not a lot of people think about this, but sex magic back then was you know typically specified only for married heterosexual couples within the context of their marriage.
Whoa.
That was it, and it dealt with these ideas of like semen retention and like whatever. Aleister Crowley comes along and he just blows that up, right? He's like, no, you can do it with any gender, any race, multiple partners at the same time. You can do it while gender bending. Oh, that's another thing that made people angry. Aleister Crowley was what we would consider in this day and age gender queer. He went by the name Alice for a while and did identify various things with being a woman. I'm not going to get super into those details, but so he was queer in many ways, which was very offensive to Victorian society.
Right.
Um, but also was his sex magic practices. So he didn't do the semen retention thing. He produced what he considered the elixir and consumed it. That was what he was all about. And like I said, he was very freakishly progressive. Like whoa, boom, Victorian minds blown. With regards to how he viewed it, how it could be performed. Um, Another thing was he was very kinky and very polyamorous. So
Mhm.
not only was he sometimes taking on multiple lovers, he encouraged his lovers to take on multiple lovers, which was viewed as amoral. And he typically chose very strong women when he did date women or I don't know, and involve them in magical workings for the most part. Women who are real go-getters in and of themselves. So we often talk about, we've hyper-focused on Aleister Crowley, but another thread I want to introduce to people that might blow some minds is women were at the front line of Thelema from its very inception. So we would not have Thelema without, for example, his first wife, Rose. She was right there. She's the reason that the Book of the Law was dictated. She was the first Scarlet Woman. And then he had a myriad of other women who really influenced and shaped how we understand this philosophy and this system today, who really carried that torch. So yeah, I mean, Aleister Crowley was kicking around and he did some cool stuff, but there's so many other people in this religion and movement, even today, that are doing amazing, cool, innovative things. And so I hate the phrase that's like, oh, it's more than just Crowley. I mean, but it's kind of true. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
so and then with regards to the kink, again, people don't really understand that. Um,
Hmm.
but he was almost exclusively a bottom and a masochist, or he was a
Hmm.
sadomasochist, but most of his things he did were that. So, I mean, there's one story, not to get too into this, where he kicked a woman in this sort of relationship, but people leave out the fact that she stabbed him just short of his heart with a knife.
That's crazy.
And he's just like, oh yeah, but it's okay because that's the kind of dynamic we have. So, I mean, you can cherry pick whatever you want from
Yeah.
his private life and private diaries because the dude was out here living.
Hmm.
But at the end of the day, I think there's a reason divinity spoke through such an individual at such a point in time.
Hmm.
So,
No, totally. That was like all new info for me. We're very pro like LGBTQ. We're very pro sex here on this podcast. So, I mean, all of that. We're pro kink here. So, that is so interesting.
yeah, so you can imagine the tabloids when he was alive were like,
Yeah.
whoa, this dude is like Satan incarnate. They called him the wickedest man in the world because he's going out here living his life in a way that would not be necessarily radical today. There's plenty of kinky
Right.
poly people who are queer as heck. But back then, it was like, whoa, this dude is out of control. And then I would say when the Satan, and so people just straight up lied about him. Like they wrote books where they just, and what's interesting, so my partner's actually a historian, and wrote a shit ton about this era. Excuse my language. I
Oh,
try
you're
not to
fine to cuss
cuss.
on this podcast.
Okay, okay. So he wrote a ton about, Victorian era magic, the occult, Western. He's a Western esotericism scholar, all that. You can actually trace what really happened. Like tons of people in different magical orders had diaries, there were court records. And you could literally point out a bunch of these Crowley rumors are just blatantly false. Like there's one about him killing a goat in a ritual, never happened. He never killed any animals in that context. Um, and I mean, but I will say, I asterisk, he was not a vegetarian. I'm a vegetarian. Crowley was not, so obviously he was eating meat. But like
Mhm.
the weird goat story never happened. I don't know. There's just so many just random stories. Like, where did this come from? And then you like trace it to some like conservative weird journalist
Right.
who had an agenda to push Christianity. You're like, ah, that makes sense. But yeah, as time went on and the Satanic Panic happened in the 80s and early 90s and all that time, all of this was drummed back up to scare people.
Hmm.
So Crowley was like portrayed as this like very left-hand path, satanic, scary guy, and his followers were just like dark, evil people. When in reality, I don't. Crowley, Crowley didn't practice what he believed to be black magic, and his definition of black magic is like really specific. It's not, but yeah, even then, he's like, I don't do that. And I don't do what I consider to be necessarily left-hand path. Again, people have different definitions on
Right.
left-hand path, but I don't consider it. And Crowley didn't either. I mean, the ultimate within the Thelemic mysticism, the ultimate goal is to unite with the divine. So you're moving up the spiritual progression so you can experience unification of self with the holy guardian angel. You can be closer with divinity, essentially,
Mhm.
and move closer to the light. And that involves some stuff like shadow work, blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, I view it as a very beautiful, I don't know, non-scary type of magic.
Yeah, no, like everything you've described is like so chill and like understandable. That's
Hmm.
so crazy. I mean, it's crazy, but it's not crazy that like the conservative journalists like tried to defame him because haven't they always loved doing that to occultists, you know? And I actually have heard of that, how he was called like the wickedest man like
Hmm.
ever. And I was like, oh, that sounds cool. Like, what do you do? Like,
The thing he did was be bisexual in
yeah,
Victoria.
like
Fair enough.
yeah, that is wicked. We love it. Yes. Okay, one thing I feel like I've seen from just online, and I'm curious if you think this is true, because again, different spheres. I think the way I am, like the way I approach
Mhm.
my magical practice, it just like repels men, and I love it that way. Like I'm really okay with that.
That's
Like
amazing.
my stuff is for the girls, the gays, and the NBs. Like this.
How do I sign up? I'm changing my spiritual path right now. I'm
Well, and
done.
that's what my question is, because I feel like you get a lot of like I feel like you get a lot of weird men in your comments saying weird shit. Like, is Thelema like is it male dominated?
Mm.
Is but maybe it is because you are such an academic person. I think I don't know. I think men see me and they're like, oh, like she's too out there. I can't, and I like
Those
that.
are the vibes I'm trying to cultivate. So
Yes.
rub off on me, please.
Yes, I'm sending you it. I'm sending you the girly pop energy. I think it's too much for them. But I wonder,
Good.
yeah, do you think it's just like do you think your area is male dominated? Do you think it's
Oh
just due
yeah.
to fact? Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, there's a lot of dudes.
Yeah. And not that guys are bad or anything. Okay.
No,
We're at a sleepover. We can say
I
that.
just want to say I love my Thelemite brothers. They are so
Yes.
inspiring and such high quality individuals. You know, I am dating a Thelemite man and I'm over the moon and obsessed with him.
Mhm.
That's a whole nother conversation. But yeah, I think there is a gender imbalance and there is an imbalance of power. I think as occultists, as practitioners, I always like to think that somehow we're better than the larger society we exist in because we've done the work. But
Right.
this isn't necessarily true.
Mhm.
Um, also, I got my head thing on
It's
for the
beautiful.
spa
I
vibes.
love it. We're officially in our spa era now.
Yeah. So I was Yeah, I was surprised and also not surprised that a lot of our larger cultural values and attitudes do seep into our smaller communities just by virtue of it being a microcosm of the
Mhm.
macrocosm of the society we live in. And so obviously there are some residual problematic views of women, opportunities not being given to women. Um, you know, it's the nature of the beast, if you will, and
Yeah.
it's unfortunate. And but however, I do feel very blessed to be living in this modern era as things are. I am an initiate, or was an initiate, of several different organizations within Thelema, and with regards to diversity, inclusion, and female representation, it's been fantastic. And so I feel very blessed when I've gone through various magical orders to have women as initiators. And so things in the various Thelemic orders are looking much more equitable than they were 20, 30, 40 years ago.
Mhm.
Heck, even 20 years ago, when I first started getting interested in this stuff, I really felt a strong calling to ceremonial magic, and I never joined anything because I was scared. I was like, there's no women in these orders.
Yeah.
Uh, but, that's not true anymore. And, you know, great efforts have been made to create space for women and elevate their voices. And I'm proud to be a part of my community. But yeah, I think a lot of speaking of men more generally, they have a lot of really ignorant views of Thelemite women and
Mhm.
Thelema. I think partially because of the Satanic Panic magazine,
Yeah.
you know, all this stuff is sort of floating out there. So they may have read a very factually inaccurate article and then make a lot of assumptions that all of us are sex maniacs, all of us are polyamorous and hypersexual, when in reality, Thelemites are extremely diverse. And a lot of us are not polyamorous. A lot of us are, some people identify as asexual. Like it's just
Mhm.
as diverse as any other human community out there.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so people really jump to conclusions, but yeah, I guess the take-home message here, amongst my rambling, is at the end of the day, we're just practitioners of the esoteric and the occult, like anyone else. So
Yes. Yeah. And nothing wrong with being polyamorous or a sex
yeah,
maniac.
100%. I will say, okay, a lot of Thelemites are poly, but don't make the assumption that all of them are, is I guess my
Right.
point.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So would you say the biggest misconception is that everyone's just like, yeah, poly and
hmm
sexual and doing Satanism?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
we're like hypersexual Satanists, and I don't think that's accurate. I think some people
Yeah.
would be down for that, but
Right.
I think for the vast majority of us, especially those of us in magical orders that require us to study and require us to be academic, it selects for more nerdy academic types, big
Yeah.
readers. I would say
Right.
most of us are kind of nerds, shy, awkward nerds. If you met us in person, and that's a great thing. But yeah, I think yeah, I'll just leave it at that.
Yes. No, I love that. I feel like I've learned so much just in the few like, I don't know,
Oh,
20
good.
minutes, 30 minutes that we've talked so far. Um,
Awesome.
so since we're talking about sex, let's just jump into sex magic because
Yay.
I love sex magic. Um, I used to be a stripper. Woo, we
Oh,
love
that's
it.
awesome.
So I've been in the sex work industry, so I'm very pro sex work.
hmm
And I think even in that very like earthy, mundane place of a strip club, you can really like the sex magic, the energetics of
hmm
sexuality that was like it was palpable. Like you could
Wow.
feel and I always talk about how my experience as a dancer was really where I started like glamour magic, sex magic together because when you are a dancer, you're crafting this persona. You have even this like almost fake magical name even that you invoke every time you go there and you're putting on your special costumes and you're doing this like dance ritual to like,
hmm
I don't know, have this whole thing. So, I mean, it was just like such a magical experience. So,
That's so great.
yeah, I love sex magic and um now I'm just like I work at home and I'm like married monogamous. So
Yeah.
even though things are like different, like sex magic is still alive here. And so I know
Oh,
there's so many
wonderful.
different ways of practicing sex magic. I'd love to ask like how you got into sex magic,
Mm.
what your relationship to sex magic is.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I thank you for sharing your background too. I loved hearing about that and different way of viewing that space. Oh, I want to make a quick, interesting tangent. So I just got back from New Orleans. There was an academic conference I was at. I wasn't a presenter. I was supporting my partner who was. But in New Orleans, prostitution used to be legal, and there was an area called Storyville where all the red light district was and the brothels and everything. And when Aleister Crowley arrived in New Orleans, this was again back when it was still legal and Storyville was still hopping, and he went to Storyville. He said, "quote Storyville redeemed his faith in humanity." So I thought that was a wonderful way to view that sort of sex positive
Yes.
brothel district. Well, yeah, interesting side fact. Like I said, I just got back from New Orleans, so that was on the top of my head. But to answer your question, so a lot of people get really excited about Thelema because who isn't excited about sex? Sex magic is there, bouncing around. We also have a archetype or goddess associated with our basically associated with our system of mysticism. So a lot of people may be familiar with the Kabbalistic tree of life. Like all things in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, Thelema is the thing that happens after Islam. So if that helps people also contextualize what Thelema is. So we had Judaism, Christianity, Islam. And then Aleister Crowley was this like prophet who like dictated some divine text after Islam. So there's like bits of that. Also, fun fact, Aleister Crowley was a Buddhist at the time of channeling the Book of
Ooh.
the Law. So there's a reaction to Buddhism,
Mm.
or I like to consider Thelema, if someone's going to take like an elevator pitch of like what it is weird Buddhism. It's weird Buddhism mixed in with like the previous Abrahamic religions, but also
Interesting.
re-understood differently.
Hmm.
Okay, so you find those bits within Thelema, and one of those bits is the Kabbalistic tree of life. Of course, it's understood differently, but you can understand it as a spiritual progression from Earth or Malkuth up to Kether, the divine source. And so this is the way of the return, the mind of God. There's this whole thing called Kabbalistic psychology. You can understand parts of yourself and your own mind on this map. But we are more interested in this thing called Dot and this thing called Babylon. And so she is in one of the parts going up this little path in our system of mysticism. People get really excited about something called crossing the abyss. And so it's basically there is not a well, I'm trying to use language we all have here, so
I
I'm
totally
not
get
using
that.
jargon. So you do
Yes.
this thing in the spiritual progression called crossing the abyss, and you're moving to this Sephiroth called Bina. I'm sorry if y'all don't understand that. Just bear with me. You go from one island to the next, okay? But there's like this void in the middle, and Crowley believed, and a lot of other people believe, you have to cross it spiritually and undergo like an ego death or like a spiritual death of some kind, and then be reborn closer to the divine source. And there's a goddess a lot of people may recognize from the Book of Revelations, Babylon, and she makes an appearance in a lot of Crowley's work. She has a lot to say. Interestingly enough, not in the Book of the Law, but other things like when he scribed the 30 Enochian Aethers and this thing called the Vision and the Voice, blah, blah, blah. So Babylon shows up, and she is in Thelema, associated with sex and death. And I want to make the distinction here, not love. Babylon is associated with sex because when you orgasm, that's associated with annihilation. So the little death, as people call it. So death and sex kind of go together. So kind of like in Revelations, she's the harlot riding the beast. Um, she's kind of doing the same in Thelemic understanding, but she's also accepting all people um, into her cup, or the cup of Babylon, which is also similar to the Holy Grail. So you pour all of yourself into her cup, and then she helps you cross the abyss and transforms you closer to the light. Anyway, that's a whole. I could go on 2 more hours about this,
I
but
love it.
so there are gods and goddesses and archetypes associated with all of these places along the Tree of Life, but one of them that gets a lot of attention because it's just so, I don't know, interesting is of course the goddess Babylon, and yeah, so she's pretty interesting. But for us, and my understanding, and most Thelemic understandings, um, she's not a fun, fluffy goddess. She's not in love or, comforting you, being motherly and doting. That's not what Babylon is. She's part of the dark divine feminine and a destroyer. Kenneth Grant associated her with the goddess Kali in Hinduism.
That's what I was just thinking of. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously not everyone buys into that association, but Kenneth Grant did. But yeah, so that's what she has going on. So there's a lot going on there. But as far as like sex magic more generally, there's a lot of opportunities for that within Thelemic practice. A lot of rituals that make use of that. But I would say it's actually a very small part of what we do, despite its publicity. And I think so that's an important distinction. It's a very small part, but it is one of those tools available for people who want to do that. Um, but yeah, themes of, I would say, regeneration, which
Mhm.
doesn't have to be, sexual reproduction. It can be any kind of regeneration in nature, are woven throughout our rituals and practices and beliefs as well. And sort of that divine source and divine concept there. Um, yeah.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I love that. I loved hearing about Babylon.
Oh, good.
Um, do you know Gabriella Herstick?
I do. She is a friend of mine, and I've had
Okay.
her on my podcast too.
Yes. So we would hang out a bit when I lived in LA, and
Oh,
I
cool.
love her books. I mean, she is
Mhm.
such a wealth of knowledge. Have you
I
read her
love.
sex magic book?
Yes, I have. Actually, it's
Yes.
one of her books is behind me. I just can't find it. I'm
Yes.
sure
No.
someone watching will be like, "Ah, there it is."
Same. Yes. And I mean I know she works with Babylon and
Mhm.
yeah, I just loved hearing that. And that made me question wait, so is the Lima technically an Abrahamic religion?
No.
Okay.
So the
I didn't
idea.
think it was, but
No,
you
no.
said that I was
Well,
like,
it depends on your definition, but I would say no. So the idea within Thelema
uh-huh.
is that mankind goes through different periods of magical formulas, different
Okay.
periods of human evolution, if you will. So the first one being associated with the maternal age or Isis, and it lasts for about 2,000 years. I don't know if this is true or not. I'm just telling you. I'm just the messenger,
Yeah.
y'all. I don't necessarily buy into that, but yeah, so it's the maternal age for 2,000 years, and then after that was 2,000 years of the paternal age.
Mhm.
And so that's when all these Abrahamic religions came
Right.
out. So it's very male centric. You know, it's also associated with like Osiris and the dying god. This idea of sin and redemption and self-sacrifice was a main theme of the old Aeon. And so then we believe this thing called the equinox of the gods happened, which is a changing of roles. And Aleister Crowley was like the prophet of that. And but like so the gods that used to be in charge were kind of replaced by the sun. sun as an S-O-N, but also sun, S-U-N. But the child, basically, the
Hmm.
crowned and conquering child, Ra-Hoor-Khuit, now sits on the throne, whereas previously it was like Abrahamic Jesus. Now it's Ra-Hoor-Khuit, and he brings in a lot of other things. Um, so the idea is each of these ages dominated by a magical formula, which also follows this formula called the Yod-He-Vav-He formula for people. I don't know. Pick
Yeah,
it up if I'm putting it down, if you will. So it follows the
absolutely.
Yod-He-Vav-He formula. So we're on the son or the child,
Yeah.
and that's the age we're currently living in. So it's not like someone flipped a switch. It's more like the sun is setting on the old system. So like from my perspective, a lot of the old magic, like Christianity, Islam, all of these things still works. It's just losing its power and slowly being replaced by a new aeonic formula. So
Mhm.
a lot of forward-facing Thelemic magicians and people of different practices who believe in this are trying to recalibrate their magic and their formulas to kind of match this and optimize the amount of juice for the
Yeah,
working.
right. Wait, so okay, so the new like eon that we're in is of the
Mhm.
sun.
Yeah, of Horus, yeah.
And so what does that entail for us? Like what can we expect?
Yeah, so it's an age of self-actualization, self-realization. It's an age of self-liberation and self-determination, freedom, and sort of rising up to grasp and understand ourselves and our individuality in a new way. So before we were sort of tethered to these old aeonic, self-sacrifice and all of these beliefs, and that's not happening anymore. So
Mhm.
it's an age of self-realization and sexual
Ooh.
expression, freedom, all of this stuff.
I love that. So okay, so the shift theoretically started to happen around Aleister Crowley time.
Yeah.
Which when was that?
When the Book of the Law was received, and I'm going to look this up and get the
Okay.
exact date because well, it technically happened during the Equinox of the Gods, which happened before the Book of the Law was received.
Gotcha.
Um, I have it in my head, but if I say it wrong, I know people are gonna freak out.
Oh no.
Yeah, 1909. I was gonna
Okay.
say 1904. I'm glad I didn't.
There you go.
Well, okay, the publication date was 1909. I think it was received in 1904.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so there you all go.
I
Because
feel
he
like
he received the text and then he just like put it away behind some skis and like was like, I don't care about this thing. This is weird. But then he's like, oh, maybe I should publish this later. So
yeah. That's so interesting because I feel like, yeah, I mean, I feel like in other like religions, philosophies and stuff, there has been also this discussion of being in the feminine or the goddess era
oh yeah.
way, 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 way long ago. And like if we look, like the oldest sculpture found of a deity was of the goddess, of a woman,
Yeah.
indicating that
Wow.
the most ancient religion was that of the goddess. And then, of course, we know once we
Hmm.
kind of shifted from hunter-gatherer to like settling down, that's when we shifted into that patriarchal where things started to get crazy. Probably wasn't crazy at first, but as we know now, we are in this time of like war, oppression, like the
Hmm.
toxic patriarchy and stuff like that. And I do feel like so many of us can kind of feel the shift happening of
Hmm.
away from these God-focused Abrahamic religions, away from like this culture of oppression and of colonialism and things like that, and kind of a grand shift, especially like as an astrologer when we look at
Yeah.
charts and we start to see like Uranus and Neptune having um that conjunction in what was it like 1994, kind of creating this like new shift. And now to literally today Pluto just moved into Aquarius, and like this is going to be a thing for the next 16 to 20 years. And a lot of astrologers and folks like say, we're in the age of Aquarius starting in the year 2000, which I feel like aligns with what you've expressed about this eon of the sun, of individuality and
Hmm.
self-realization. Like, I feel like Aquarius is very collective, but I also feel like it is kind of individual and growth, expansion, things like that. So it's just interesting to see different philosophies, different
Yeah.
spiritualities kind of come to the same conclusion, low key.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and the amazing thing for me too is how much of Thelema and of this stuff is just in other practices and I mean, aside from the obvious ones, like okay, Gerald Gardner, like in his original Book of Shadows, took a ton of Crowley stuff word for word and shoved it in there, and
Mm.
almost everything was from different resources, kind of like a cookbook.
Yeah.
But I mean, aside from that, like I see it everywhere. Like I see Thelema and like little bits of our stuff everywhere that people make use of, and I think that's really cool. And that's one thing I encourage people as well is like Thelema is not a closed practice. So if you find something useful from our toolkit, whether it's like saying will before you eat or doing a ritual called Liber Resh Vel Helios, which is a solar adoration, which could be fun for people to experiment with if they're used to lunar magic. Try something
Ooh,
with the sun, see how
yes.
that feels. But yeah, pick the pieces that feel good to you. Heck, even the Thoth tarot. So
Hmm.
that's a whole nother conversation. But people are very familiar with the Rider-Waite-Smith deck. But if you're interested in working with that kind of new aeonic current, the Thoth tarot is actually in line with that. So that might feel very different for you. The correspondences are different, and it's a very future forward looking deck. So if you're feeling stale in your practice, consider adding some Thelemic stuff to see how that feels. Go for it.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I've never had a Thoth tarot before. Like I don't have
Okay.
a single one. And I always see it and I'm like, ooh, I want to get it. And now I feel like maybe this is telling me, maybe you're the messenger telling me
Maybe
to
I
pick one
am.
up.
And you
Yeah.
know what? I converted one of my previous talks from Mystic South, that's like an intro to the Thoth Tarot, into like a video presentation for YouTube. So for people who are like, I don't know where to begin. Well, I made a video for you and it's based on one of my talks and there's like a slideshow and stuff. So enjoy.
That's perfect. Yes. Send me the link if you like
Yes,
after, and I'll make
absolutely.
sure to put that in the show notes because that
Okay,
sounds
cool.
amazing. I had one comment I wrote down because I wanted to say it. You were
Yeah.
talking about in New Orleans, Aleister Crowley like went to the red light district
Hmm.
and was like, this restored my faith in humanity. I love that. And it just reminded me of this past March, I did a little trip in Europe and I went to Amsterdam and I
Oh,
went to
cool.
the red light district there in Amsterdam and it was so fascinating. And obviously I was already somebody who was very sex work positive and there was a museum and
Oh, cool.
you kind of are just walking down this specific district and you can see all the ladies in their windows and my husband and I went to the museum and it was just like it also kind of restored my faith in humanity because
Oh.
obviously that's not the kind of work I was doing, but sex work, it's dangerous no matter what you're doing, whether you're dancing or you're doing full service, like it's a dangerous career and typically the kind of laws that, especially here in the States, they're putting into effect are actually more harmful.
Yeah.
And how they've done it in Amsterdam was just so amazing for the girls there and for the workers. And like they had somehow found a way to make it like so safe and so good. And the workers are making all their money. And I just like when you told me
Yeah.
that, I was like, oh my God, same, Alistair.
Oh
Like,
my
me too.
gosh, how great. Wow, I
Like,
love hearing that. That would restore my faith in humanity too.
yes, it was so cool. And also, like, everyone is so sex work positive there because since legalizing this, in the same way that here in the states that have legalized cannabis, they're
Hmm.
like, whoa, we're making so much money from taxing this. We love this.
Hmm.
That's kind of what's happening there. They're like, wait, these workers are like bringing so much to our economy. And so they're like, everyone's just like so respectful of the workers. And I'm like, oh, I only hope that we can become that advanced here in the States and become respectful of like the sex workers. And yeah, it'll probably be a
I
while.
100% agree. 100% agree.
Yeah. With the way things are going, it might be a while,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
we'll,
unfortunately.
we'll get there. Cool. Well, I just have a few more
All
questions.
right.
But I'm curious, like, what, if anything, do you feel like is missing from your specific sphere of the occult community? If you
Mm.
could, like, bring anything in, What do you think is missing?
Joy.
Oh my God, yes.
That's a heavy answer, but it's
Heavy.
one I thought about it. I could say a lot of things, but I think at the
Mm,
end of the day, the one underlying main problem is perhaps joy.
mm,
Um, specifically as a Thelemite in the Aeon of Horus, traditional Buddhism interprets existence as suffering.
mhm,
Thelema interprets existence as pure joy.
mm,
We are divided in this incarnation for a chance of union and for the joy of coming together and experience reunification. And that in itself is a beautiful, divine, glorious process. And how amazing is it that we have the privilege to have knowledge to do magic and the space to do magic, even if it's just on the astral plane in your head. How cool is it in this incarnation that you happen to stumbled upon whatever it is you're doing and be able to do it in some capacity? If you're someone who can light a candle in your house or burn incense and do ritual, no matter how big or small, that is a blessing. If
mm.
you are someone who gets in-person community, wow, that's awesome. An occult bookstore, wow. I think they're not just in our daily life, but in our work we do. I think at least in my community, we get so focused on the end results, so focused on the goal. I would say we get caught up in the lust of results,
Mm.
that we lose sight of how beautiful the process itself is and the process of transformation and growth. But I would like to see more joy, maybe not just in my community, but also the world in general.
Yes. What a beautiful answer. Oh my gosh. No, that was perfect. And
Oh,
like,
good.
yeah, I mean, I think we get so caught up in our day-to-day life on things. Like, I know for me, like things being perfect or doing it right and doing enough and like feeling bad when you don't feel like you're doing enough, especially in your magical practice. And I mean, your words of if you can light a candle, like how beautiful is that? That is like already like you have the capacity to do these things. Like, how fucking
Yeah,
cool is that?
it is. It is. Yeah.
Like, we don't even, yeah, we get so out of that. That was so beautiful. Oh my
Thank
God.
you.
Oh my gosh. I love that. Yeah. And I see that in my sphere too. I feel like especially, and I need to get off social media and just
Yes.
like tone it down a little bit. But I feel like it's so I did a video earlier this year about the the pressure to be a serious witch.
I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. And like I think that's something I've noticed on social media. It sometimes feels, especially like glamour magic area too, it
Hmm.
gets definitely like viewed as floofy or like, oh, I don't know. I think things that are viewed as traditionally femme or feminine
Yes. Yeah.
tend to get a bad rep. And obviously, like I just love girly things and people have their preconceived notions about things like that. And there just seems to be such this like energy to prove how smart you are and prove how serious you are and prove how much more intelligent you are than somebody else. And it's just like, what if we vibed? Like, what if we just had fun?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think as content creators too, like we are kind of subjected to the comments of every random person in the
Hmm.
world. And so a lot of times, like, yeah, it can feel there can be a lot of pressure there if you don't say the right year or you mispronounce something. It's like you're kind of criticized. You're expected to be perfect, I feel
Hmm.
sometimes. And so I think that the same conclusion of like more fun, more joy, like
Absolutely.
just have a good time. Because what the fuck are we doing here? Like,
Yeah.
what is
Yeah.
this?
Yeah. Yeah. If it's not bringing you joy, then what are we
Yes.
doing?
Literally. Oh my gosh. Well, I have one more question for you,
Yay.
and it's something I love asking everyone.
Okay.
What do you think happens when we die?
Okay. I have no idea,
Yeah.
which on the surface is a lazy answer, but let me explain.
Yes.
So, I think, especially as a Thelemite, doubt plays a very important role in my understanding of the nature of reality and in and of itself. Um, so much of going through the world or going through a spiritual transformation where you have to strip away illusion or strip away things that society has put on you. Ask questions like, well, what is my gender and sexuality?
Yeah.
Which not everyone has to ask, they already have it figured out. But, for someone like me who grew up in a time where I didn't know gay people existed, I
Mhm.
had to go through that period of questioning what was real, what wasn't, understanding myself, and stripping away expectations of society at large at what I was going to do with my life, expectations of family, in order to be able to not only understand myself, but be able to do what it is I felt like I needed to do in the world.
Mhm.
So there's a process of purification, for lack of a better word. And part of that purification is also examination of beliefs, implicit beliefs. So there's a lot of good ideas, or and some bad ideas out there about what happens after death. Um, I, Many people notice I spoke as if I believed in reincarnation earlier, but am I 100% confident? No, I'm not.
Mhm.
I feel that I will not know what happens until I die.
Yeah.
I don't believe in a Christian heaven or hell.
Mhm.
That's not a part of how I understand the world at all. So, but yeah, I operate as if I don't know. There's a lot of things I don't know. And I think that affords me a certain freedom. It
Yes.
affords me a certain freedom to interact with reality with eyes unclouded. And I think that's a beautiful thing. So, obviously, I'm not perfect. I go into every situation with biases and I'm human. But
Yeah.
if there's something I can examine and be like, wow, I have no way of knowing, like what happens after death,
Mhm.
um, I think that's great. And so I plan to live in a cloud of not knowing until I die, and then I will know.
Yes.
And then I will possibly reincarnate, not knowing a single thing again.
Right.
We'll see.
Yes. I love that. I literally feel the same. And like, I love what you said about how taking that philosophy of like not caring, but like kind of not caring to prove or be so held tight to a truth because you know you don't know.
Yeah.
Allowing yourself that fluidity is so freeing. And
Yes.
like like being raised Catholic, it was like, this is what it is,
Hmm.
no questions asked. And then kind of going through my own personal spiritual awakening and being like, oh shit, no one knows. Why'd they all tell me like they knew? And
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
does just feel freeing to be like, right now I'm feeling reincarnation, but that's subject to change at any given point, and I'm okay with that. And that's something that I feel like I try to tell like my listeners and people I talk to of like, give yourself space to shift and to change and to come back and to leave something
Absolutely.
because I think that's where growth comes from. You can't get too bogged down and holding tight to a belief. It's the growth happens when you allow yourself to question and be curious and
Hmm.
to not know. Yeah.
Absolutely. 100%.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Lynn, so much for
Yeah.
being on here today. I mean, this was so much fun. I,
Yes, I had a great time.
yes, no, I did too. It was amazing. I would love to know, super last question. I know I said the last question was the last
No
question,
worries.
but what are you working on currently? Where can people find you? Do you have any offerings? How can people work with you?
Yeah, so I guess I'll just put it out there. I do run my own independent study group of Thelema, so it's through Discord and through my Patreon. So you can find my Patreon as Maevius Lynn. It's in my link tree. And if you want to join our book club and join our studies, we also do stuff. We did a study of the Thoth Tarot. We did a study of the Gnostic Mass. So we cover all of that stuff, and it's a warm, friendly place to come study Thelema. Um, and it's not associated with any organization; it's independent. So, but there are a lot of different people in there from different Thelemic orders. And everyone has to play nice. So from different AA lineages, different other groups, and if you do want to make connections and see what's out there, that's a great place to do that as well and ask questions. So you can do that. I also have a YouTube channel where I teach and share educational content. I also share like, I don't know, Things that interest me, like books, but also I teach stuff. And I have actual visual representations of some of the Thelemic rituals, so you don't have to read a dusty book. Although, please read the dusty books. Those are so great. Those are better than anything I could ever do. But if you need something else, you can see me doing the rituals. Wow, it's right there. And then you can find me on a lot of different social media, sharing updates and stuff like Instagram, Threads, etc.
That's amazing. Yes, I'll have all those links down below so you guys can find Lynn and hang out. Thank you so much once again. This was so much fun.
Yeah, it really was. I really appreciate coming on and chatting, so thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you guys so much for listening to this podcast. I hope you enjoyed. Make sure to give Lynn some love. All of her links will be in the show notes down below. And also, if you love this podcast as much as I think you do, go ahead and leave a review. Reviews on Spotify, Google, Apple, wherever you listen, really just hype this podcast up even more, brings us so much good energy, and lets other people know that you have put your 5-star approval rating on this podcast. So I love it. I appreciate it. It's a free way to give back. And if you're craving more good witch, bad bitchery from me, you know where to find me at Luna Seranova on all platforms, and you can get a reading with me, tarot or astrology, on lunaseranova.com. I'm also doing my Seducing the Stars Astrology Academy. So if you would like to learn more about your natal chart and come out of this portal so empowered, so embodied, and like your brand new, very own professional astrologer, this is the course for you. Okay, so you can find those links down below. I would love for you to join. We have 24 babes in the class right now, and it's just so amazing. Other than that, I love you all so much, and I will see you all next time.